I mean, honestly, the way that I get into a character is through their style. So
Interview his wife's love interest in a film. It's kind of crazy.
I don't remember seeing this on the schedule.
Dive in, shall we?
What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most beloved couples is at the center of a legal web so shady, it could destroy their squeaky clean image forever? Because just days after being exposed for using a mysterious shell company to secretly subpoena private data, Ryan Reynolds suddenly updated the company's records and made himself the CEO. No warning, no explanation, just his name. And the timing, suspiciously perfect. Now people are asking, did Ryan just take the fall to protect Blake Lively? Or is this the final piece of evidence proving they've both been playing a very dangerous game from the start? Every major celebrity has a business or two behind the scenes, a production company here, a fashion label there.
So people said, okay, this is a he said, she said thing. We don't know who to believe. But like I told you earlier, this story is deeper than it seems.
But Van Zandt Inc. wasn't one of those. No headlines, no celebrity endorsements, no public records linking it to anyone you've heard of. Just a corporate shell, quietly registered in New York back in 2019, and then promptly forgotten. No biennial statements, no updated officer filings, no record of activity for 4 years. On paper, Van Zandt was legally inactive, a ghost company. And yet, this lifeless entity somehow came back from the dead just in time to file a lawsuit with some very real consequences. That lawsuit wasn't random. It was laser-focused, targeting one person, Jen Abel, a former PR insider with access to explosive information.
Summer when all of this started to come out. Jennifer Abel was Jones's partner at her firm Joneswork PR, and she was—
Through Van Zandt, someone was able to subpoena her private communications, including texts, iCloud records, and phone data, all without ever revealing who was really pulling the strings. At the time, nobody batted an eye. It looked like a routine corporate legal move. But here's the thing. Van Zandt had no contracts, no known partnerships, no public-facing services. Nothing that explained why it would have any beef with Jen. It wasn't a media company. It wasn't a production studio. It wasn't even in good standing with the state when the lawsuit was filed. So how, and more importantly, why, was it able to get that subpoena approved? Turns out that question would unravel something far bigger than a simple breach of contract claim.
On the Baldoni Wayfair account, and she is being accused of running a smear campaign against Blake Lively.
Because when investigators pulled Van Zandt's original filing, they found nothing but a generic registered agent. No owners, no board, no employees. But then, out of the blue, that changed. And the name that appeared on the record sent shockwaves through every layer of this story. When Van Zandt Inc. filed that lawsuit, it didn't make headlines. But what it did do, quietly, behind closed doors, was gain access to something incredibly valuable. Jen Abel's phone data. We're talking private messages, cloud backups, internal documents, the kind of stuff that doesn't just leak. It has to be taken. And in this case,
also feel bad for Jennifer Abel if everything she is saying is even in the realm of truth, in the ballpark of truth. I feel bad.
It was taken under the guise of a legal subpoena. Here's how it went down. Van Zandt sued in New York court, claiming a contract dispute that allegedly required access to Jen's communications. The judge approved the subpoena, likely unaware that the company requesting it hadn't filed a single state update in years and had no proven connection to the people involved. But the story doesn't end there, because once that data was handed over, it didn't stay with Van Zandt. It went somewhere else, straight into the hands of Blake Lively. And if that sounds suspicious, it's because it is. Court filings later revealed that Blake admitted to using the lawsuit, not for business, not for damages, but as a tool, an investigative method, as her lawyers put it. In plain English, it was a front. The lawsuit wasn't about justice or contracts. It was a legal end run designed to grab data without alerting the actual targets.
With her lawsuit against him, she did not appear for her deposition, and it has been rescheduled for July. So not really a strong...
Once the info was extracted, the lawsuit disappeared. Quietly dropped, no follow-up, no new filings, just gone. That's when legal experts started whispering, this wasn't just messy, it was possibly manipulative. A sham action used to give the appearance of legitimacy while skirting normal legal procedures. And the person behind the curtain? Well, that answer came next. And it changed everything. For months, Van Zandt operated like a legal phantom, suing, subpoenaing, and then vanishing, all while hiding behind a corporate veil. But then something happened that no one saw coming. On the very same day, a viral video exposed Van Zandt's murky origins.
Van Zandt is not a party to the Lively Wayfair lawsuit. It's not even a third party.
Ryan Reynolds' name suddenly appeared on the company's official record. Out of nowhere, after 4 years of silence, Van Zandt filed its first ever biennial update with the New York Secretary of State, listing exactly one name: Chief Executive Officer Ryan Reynolds. No board of women, no Blake, no co-directors, just Ryan. It was a move so perfectly timed, so surgical in its execution, that it raised more questions than answers. Why now? Why only him? And why, after all this time, did he suddenly decide to step out of the shadows? To many, the message was clear. Ryan was planting a legal flag, claiming ownership of Van Zandt and trying to rewrite history. Because if he's the CEO and only he is listed,
to go back, but if anybody knows what I'm talking about or what rabbit hole I'm in and can point me where to go, help me.
Then Blake can no longer be held accountable for Van Zandt's actions. At least, that's the theory. Critics immediately called it revisionist history.
And while Ryan
a desperate
and Blake
attempt
also
to steer
had
legal
theirs.
scrutiny away from Blake and onto Ryan, who had already been dismissed from the certain parts of the case. And if he's no longer a named defendant, well, maybe he feels safe enough to take the fall. But here's the twist. That move may have made things worse. Because now, legal analysts are saying, if Ryan was behind Van Zandt the whole time, then he wasn't just a husband supporting his wife. He was an active participant, a player, a strategic, deliberate agent working in tandem with Blake.
That Stephanie Jones then happily handed over Pinocchio everything.
And that could change everything. On the surface, Blake Lively looked untouched. No public filings, no legal footprint. She wasn't a director of Van Zandt. She wasn't an officer. She was officially nowhere in the picture. But the picture was a lie. Because behind the scenes, Blake's name kept popping up. Not in business records, but in legal filings, confidential subpoenas, and documents that should never have reached her, unless she was involved. It started with a subtle crack in the armor. Her attorney openly admitted that the entire Van Zandt lawsuit, the one used to extract private texts and data from Jen Abel, was never meant to resolve anything. In their own words, it was an investigative tool.
Took Jen Abel's phone and laptop and, according to the Wayfarer parties, improperly seized.
Not a real case, not a legitimate legal claim, just a front, a weaponized subpoena disguised as a lawsuit. And that's when the game changed. Because in that moment, Blake Lively's team acknowledged something huge. The lawsuit wasn't about justice. It was about access. To information, to evidence, to control. But it didn't stop there. Her team also admitted that Blake herself received the subpoenaed data. She got the files from JonesWorks, the PR firm allegedly targeted by the Van Zandt action. Not through court, not through a third party, directly. So ask yourself, if she wasn't connected to Van Zandt, how did she legally receive the private, subpoenaed contents of someone else's phone? And why did she admit to having it before discovery even began?
To conjure to the court to say that we, Van Zandt, are harmed. Our reputation has been...
That alone suggests something much deeper. That Blake wasn't just a curious spouse watching from the sidelines. She was involved in the planning, the timing, the execution. She knew exactly what was being requested, and why. And here's where it gets even messier. When the pressure started mounting and people began questioning Van Zandt's legitimacy, the company suddenly filed its first ever update since 2019. And who did they list? Ryan Reynolds, just him. No Blake. One name, one title, one shield. The timing couldn't have been more calculated. Just days after a video exposed the company's inactive status, it was magically brought back to life with Ryan at the helm.
I know a lot of people are talking about how Van Zandt now says Ryan Reynolds is CEO, at least in the New York entity.
No coincidence, no accident. It looked like a cover-up. Because if Ryan is the CEO and only Ryan is listed, then legally, Blake isn't liable. She's not the operator, she's just a recipient. It was a neat trick, one that lawyers called revisionist history. Rewrite the past, shift the blame, and hope no one notices. But people noticed, because everything about this maneuver screamed damage control, and suddenly Blake's clean record didn't look so clean. Her silence didn't look so innocent, and her involvement, even if unofficial, looked deliberate. So let's put it all together. She admits the lawsuit was fake. She receives the data it harvested.
This is probably the biggest story since this entire Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni thing started.
The company disappears, then suddenly reappears with Ryan's name. And through it all, she claims she wasn't involved. That's not just suspicious, that's a strategy. And the only question left was, how long could they keep it up? By now, it was obvious something wasn't right. A dead company suddenly comes alive. A lawsuit appears and disappears with surgical precision. Private data changes hands behind closed doors. And at the center of it all, Hollywood's golden couple. But as the heat turned up, Blake and Ryan didn't panic. They pivoted. And that's when the legal games began. Their lawyers introduced a powerful tool into the equation, one that could block questions, bury documents, and stall discovery: spousal privilege.
Lawsuits. Again, Katie over at Without a Crystal Ball found this information, which is so
Under New York law, spouses can't be forced to testify against each other in most cases. Conversations between husband and wife, protected. Communications in confidence, off limits. And just like that, Ryan and Blake had a legal shield. But here's where things get complicated and a little sinister. Spousal privilege only works when you're acting as a spouse, not as a business partner, not as a CEO. So if Ryan was involved in Van Zandt as the head of a company, then the privilege doesn't apply. And that's exactly what legal experts are pointing out. Because the moment Ryan listed himself as CEO, he wasn't just Blake's husband anymore. He became an executive, legally responsible for corporate actions.
Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had a shell company, okay?
That role comes with paperwork, accountability, and zero protection from subpoenas. So what does that mean? It means if Ryan sent that subpoena, if he managed that lawsuit through Van Zandt, he can no longer hide behind marriage. Every message, every email, every whispered instruction could now be fair game in court. And that's a nightmare scenario for both of them, because their entire legal defense is built on the idea that they're separate. Blake is not Van Zandt. Ryan is just a husband. One's in the spotlight, the other's behind the curtain. But with this latest filing, that curtain just ripped wide open. Suddenly, the line between personal and professional vanished.
It's not her fault, but also why is she responding? Why are her attorneys responding?
The couple that once stood as Hollywood's most untouchable duo, charming, philanthropic, untouchable, now looked like they were running a private legal operation behind a marriage certificate. Even worse, they share the same legal team, same law firm, same strategy, same playbook. Which means they're not operating as two separate people. They're operating as one coordinated legal force. And that's exactly what critics in opposing counsel have been saying all along. That Ryan and Blake aren't just working together behind the scenes. They are orchestrating this entire legal chess match as a unit, using their marriage not as a bond of love, but as a strategic firewall. For most of this drama, there was one person who didn't seem fazed by the whispers, the filings, or even the tangled connections between Van Zandt, Blake, and Ryan. Judge Lyman.
Looks like Judge Lehman may be in trouble. Today, a legal memorandum that was filed by Brett Douglas McDowell is asking the court.
Early in the proceedings, he made it clear Ryan Reynolds was nothing more than a concerned husband, a supportive spouse, not a legal agent, not a corporate executive, and certainly not involved in the Van Zan scheme. In his own words, there was no amount of evidence that could convince him otherwise. He shut it down, dismissed the claims against Ryan, refused to allow discovery on that angle. Case closed, except it wasn't. Because after Ryan updated Van Zan's records and listed himself as CEO, that entire narrative cracked in half. Suddenly, the idea that Ryan was just the husband didn't hold up. He wasn't a bystander anymore. He was in charge of the very company that carried out the subpoena.
Van Zan subpoena more recently than May 16th. So like more recently than that. And
he wasn't receiving orders, he was giving them. Which means the judge's earlier ruling, the one that dismissed Ryan's involvement as baseless, now looks dangerously premature. And that's not just embarrassing, it's potentially devastating. Because one of Judge Lyman's key arguments was that there was no link between the Van Zan lawsuit and the documents Blake received. He stated in writing that the subpoena through Van Zan had nothing to do with the data that ended up in Blake's hands. But now, even Blake's own legal team has admitted that's exactly what happened. They called it an investigative tool. They admitted the subpoena was used to gather information for Blake's personal legal battle.
So we're always very careful with these declarations, and we go over them many times with the client before we sign them and file them with the court.
They confirmed the documents from Van Zan went straight to her, which means Judge Lyman didn't just get it wrong. He dismissed the case based on incomplete, or now disproven, information. And legal experts are already saying the consequences could be enormous. Because when a judge makes a ruling based on false premises, there's only one path forward: appeal. And in this case, the appeal wouldn't just be about reversing a decision. It would be about exposing what some are calling a strategic abuse of the legal system, using a fake lawsuit to gain early access to sensitive data, while the court looked the other way. Now, all eyes are back on Judge Lyman. Will he admit the mistake? Will he reopen discovery? Or will he double down and risk looking complicit in a cover-up? Whatever happens next, one thing is clear.
Had filed against Doe defendants and said, my reputation is being harmed, not quite.
The courtroom, once a place of confidence for Blake and Ryan, might soon become their biggest liability. For years, Ryan Reynolds has been Hollywood's golden boy. Effortlessly charming, lovably sarcastic. The guy who pokes fun at himself, supports his wife's career, and always seems to do the right thing. So when this scandal broke, most people gave him the benefit of the doubt. He wasn't the type to play legal puppet master. He was probably just caught in the crossfire, dragged into a situation he didn't create. At least that's what they wanted to believe. But now, that theory doesn't hold up. Because Ryan didn't just sign a form.
Star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds. He filed official documents, taking over Van Zan Inc. as its CEO right after the company was publicly exposed.
Also from Ryan, because Ryan could have been like, oh, I'm done here, right? And I know their lawyer made a statement, but I just...
He put his name on the line, seemingly to pull Blake's off of it. So what's really going on? Is Ryan taking the fall for Blake? Stepping in to absorb the legal blowback and protect her public image? Or has he been calling the shots all along? Some legal insiders think Ryan's name on the company wasn't a recent development. It was always him. He just waited until the pressure was unbearable before making it official. And that delay? It may have been intentional. A calculated move to keep Blake insulated until the storm passed. If true, that would make Ryan the architect, not the shield. And let's not forget, this wasn't just one lawsuit. It was a scheme. A multi-layered, precision-timed effort to obtain sensitive data.
Compel the Van Zan subpoena and some related documents about that. And we have 2 responses that have been filed to that moment.
Hide the source, and then fold the case quietly while the information was funneled into another legal battle. That kind of operation doesn't happen by accident. It takes planning, it takes connections, and it takes someone willing to get their hands dirty while keeping their public image spotless. So was Ryan acting on his own? Or was he part of something bigger? A carefully orchestrated legal end run designed to get what Blake needed without ever exposing her? Because here's the truth. no one wants to say out loud. If Ryan was acting as Blake's agent, using his shadow company to gather intel for her lawsuits, then he's not just involved, he's complicit. And everything they've done to distance themselves from each other in court becomes a lie.
Why aren't the attorneys for Van Zandt responding? It's just also confusing.
Even worse, it turns the couple's marriage into a weapon, a way to dodge discovery, block subpoenas, and control the narrative without facing the consequences. To some, it looks like loyalty. To others, it looks like malice. So ask yourself, is Ryan Reynolds the fall guy in a Hollywood scandal? Or has he been playing this game from the beginning, with a smile on his face and a strategy in hand? Now that the truth is out, or at least pieces of it, the entire legal landscape around Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds has shifted. The once invisible Van Zandt Inc. has been dragged into the light. Ryan's name is officially tied to the company. Blake's lawyers have admitted the lawsuit was a sham.
Who handle individual companies and clients. And so what happened was there was a break between Steph Jones and this.
And the judge who dismissed Ryan's role might be rethinking everything. So where does that leave them? For now, they're not behind bars. They're not banned from Hollywood events. They're still smiling in interviews, posting curated family moments on Instagram, and being hailed as one of America's favorite couples. But behind the scenes, everything is unraveling. Legal analysts are calling for renewed discovery. There's talk of appeals, possibly even perjury, depending on how deep this coordinated effort really goes. And if a higher court agrees that the Van Zandt subpoena was used as a smokescreen to launder stolen data, Blake and Ryan could face more than just public embarrassment. They could face serious legal consequences, because no amount of fame, no clever PR move, and no charming late-night appearance can cover up what this looks like.
Blake Lively subpoenas Perez Hilton and Candace Owens in effort to prove Justin Baldoni's alleged smear campaign.
Power couple using shell companies, secret subpoenas, and spousal privilege to gain an unfair edge in a legal war they weren't supposed to win. And the worst part? They may have already won. The original case was dismissed. The subpoenas were quashed. The data was already used. The damage, arguably, is done. But what if this isn't over? What if Wayfair Studios decides to appeal? What if new evidence proves Ryan wasn't acting as a husband, but as a covert operator? What if the judge, or a higher one, realizes just how deep this manipulation goes? And what if the only reason Ryan came forward as Van Zandt's CEO was because someone else was about to do it first? This story isn't just about a lawsuit. It's about how far powerful people will go to protect each other and how easily the system can be bent in their favor when no one's watching. But now, everyone's watching.